We are back with Tom Szaniawski. He is a lawyer with the Legal Aid Society. We're taking your phone calls, talking specifically his specialty is re-entry for inmates, ex-cons, if you will, who have served their time, have gotten out, seeking expungement. And it comes at a time in society where, coming out of the pandemic and everything else, we all hear about how difficult it is for employers to find qualified applicants these days. And there are a lot of individuals that maybe are qualified, but the one thing holding them back is that maybe they did some time, but they've turned their lives around. And in the past, it was more difficult to find work. Right now in this marketplace, I know firsthand of many employers who maybe in the past, you know, given the large pool to choose from, would not have gone with someone who just got out of jail. And now they're hiring them and finding out that they're good employees. I mean, this is a time when it's happening, so it's a good time for these folks to get out, look for work, but, you know, get an expungement right now if they can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A lot of folks don't realize that about 90% of employers run background checks, and about 50 or 60% of possible landlords run background checks. So oftentimes people don't realize this until they apply for a job and their background check comes back and the employer has to tell them, I'm sorry, but you have things on your record. So expunging as much as we can, especially if an individual is eligible for convictions to be expunged, we can clean up their record substantially. Best case scenario, we could clean out their record entirely.
Wow. Do you think employers in general, especially if they see that, are more likely to hire these people now than ever before?
100%, yeah. An expungement in the eyes of the law basically means it never happened.
Okay.
You can, if somebody asks you, have you ever been arrested or convicted of a crime or charged with a crime, if those issues have been expunged, then you can legally say no.
And the employers are hungry for workers.
That is correct. And one thing to note with certificates of employability, which I believe I mentioned, we could get into that further. But certificate of employability, it gives specific benefits to an employer. It will protect them against lawsuits from third parties based upon the notion that, hey, you knew the person was a felon, but you hired them anyway, and then, you know, Joe Smith did this, this, and this to me. I'm suing you for negligent hiring. Employers are insulated against that.
That's an excellent point. I'm so glad you mentioned that.
And the second point that I think is equally important is there is a program called the Federal Bonding Program. What that does is allows an employer to, for free, get a bond for, I'm not 100% sure, but I believe it's about $5,000, which is free for 6 months, and that protects an employer against acts of an employee directly, which means if somebody's dipping into the till or if somebody is absconding with company property, the employer has that bond to rely on to be made whole again. So between the insulation from third-party lawsuits and the insulation against bad acts of the actual employee, just on that basis, an employer is already in better shape in terms of making an informed decision and understanding what risks they may or may not be taking on.
Let's take a call from Thomasina. Thomasina, good morning. Hi, what's on your mind?
Good morning. You can call me Tomcat. My daddy called me Tomcat.
All right, Tomcat.
I was like his little firecracker.
Gotcha.
A lot of people can't pronounce my name either.
Okay.
I've got a question about expungement.
Sure.
Say, for instance, you said drug-related charges, but say I got busted with so much cocaine, you could probably fill up the back of a U-Haul truck. And I even had a nickname, the Queen of Cocaine or something. But I got a presidential pardon. Could my record be expunged with a presidential pardon? I'll hang up and take your response offline. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask her, are you referring to yourself, Tomcat? Oh, she hung up. Darn it.
Sure.
I wanted to ask her that. I mean, I wonder if that's a hypothetical or if she actually got a presidential pardon. If you're still watching, Tomcat, let me know. I'd like to talk to you about that.
Right.
But the presidential pardon trumps everything, doesn't it? I mean, or does that not expunge your record?
I'm not 100% sure about a presidential pardon because that's an operation of federal law.
Okay.
But I can tell you that if you receive a pardon under the auspices of the state of Tennessee, then yes, all of those charges can be expunged, and typically you walk away with no record record whatsoever, I would make an educated guess that the operation is analogous when it comes to a presidential pardon and the implications of that.
I think her point maybe was if it was a very serious drug crime, as she said, someone who's the queen of cocaine and a ton of it, under normal circumstances would never happen, but we know sometimes pardons come down. That would maybe open the door then for expungement if you say got a pardon from the governor.
Again, there are still some limits there. And frankly, I haven't personally dealt with any pardon situations in my time at the Legal Aid Society. But any charges that you do get expunged typically are removed from your record.
Are there petitions in certain instances, and how do these come up, to restore citizenship?
To restore citizenship rights, what that means is essentially those rights that you lose as a convicted felon, like the right to vote, the right to own or possess a gun, the right to sit on a jury, the right to hold public office.
Okay, I was wondering what that referred to.
Those are all typically the types of rights that are stripped when one is convicted of a felony. And the process of restoration of citizenship rights, as I mentioned, it's similar to the other processes. You give character references, you can have character witnesses testify in court, you provide letters of support from your community, and a judge basically weighs your evidence against the likelihood of harm resulting to the community, and basically will go ahead and issue an order that restores at least certain of the citizenship rights, not necessarily all of them, depending on what they stem from. But a court will restore citizenship rights even if it's to an extended, even if it's to a limited extent.
Let's go next to Joanna, I believe, or Joanne. Joanne, good morning. Hi, Joanne.
Hi.
Hey.
I want to ask, do y'all deal with kids getting bullied in school and getting hurt, where the teacher don't tell the parents that they got bullied in school, and they come home with dried up blood and hit in the stomach?
That type of stuff. Okay,
Sure.
Thank you. I know where she's going. Yeah, parents sometimes with issues with bullying. Sometimes they can become legal issues where they want to get the district on notice if nothing's being done. Does a lawyer help? I don't know. Do you get calls like that?
I don't personally get calls like that. I'm not sure that arguably falls under the ambit of criminal law, but that is an example of a question that is very fact intensive. Someone in our family law group would be able to answer that question better in terms of the scope of services. Family law is typically focused on domestic violence, providing orders of protection for folks who are victims of domestic violence. When it comes to juveniles, I have some other associates at other organizations who run programs directed specifically towards juveniles, and I can make that available to you, and if you want to follow up on that. But legal aid, I've never heard of that specific issue being addressed.
Okay. Well, Joanne, we'll put the number up again at the end of the program. As he said, if it's not something they can help you with, you can almost always maybe at least refer them. And that is a sticky issue in terms of, bullying and where a lawyer would come into play one way or the other. I'm not sure how.
Yeah.
You can refer them. I mean, that happens. You get a lot of different types of calls.
And just to qualify that, we do try to pair people with volunteer lawyers when we can't take their case in-house, but there's always more legal demand than there is, supply. So we try our best to place people. Unfortunately, it's limited by the attorneys we have access to.
How many lawyers do you work with out of the office here? You said you're in over 40 locations around the state.
We have 8 offices, and we serve 48 counties in Middle Tennessee and the Cumberland. My office, I believe, has about 12 or 15 attorneys and substantial support staff, all of whom are absolutely integral to our being able to do the jobs that we do. So Nashville is the largest location, and our smaller offices in the outlying counties, may have 2 or 3 attorneys.
There are a lot of lawyers that are in private practice that do some pro bono, and that's very good of them to do that. Someone like you, when you were in law school, maybe you had visions of being some big criminal law attorney or a prosecutor or something. I would imagine most of the people working at Legal Aid Society are there because their heart is truly in it. You're not doing it to make a ton of money, because you probably could make a lot more in private practice, but it comes from your belief that everyone deserves some legal representation. And there are some indigent that without you would have nothing.
Yes.
Is that what it comes down to? I mean, you're thinking how you decided in law school you would go this route.
My thinking in law school stemmed from a clinical externship I took part in, where we represented immigrant tenants in the Queens, New York area who were facing harassment and other nasty treatment at the hands of their landlords. I spent a year doing that and learning about, the different cultures that are affected, the various barriers that they have to communicate effectively, and basically help people deal with their troublesome landlords. So having spent a year doing that and coming to appreciate the satisfaction and appreciation that clients have, that really is where my interest in public interest law stems from. And I carried that over after moving to Tennessee by working with the Legal Aid Society.
As it still stands today, you look at the big picture of legal representation. It's not a level playing field, is it?
No, unfortunately, it is largely a function of socioeconomic means. Lawyers cost money. Depending on the situation, we may be talking about a couple $100 for a consultation. You might be talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars, for a criminal defense lawyer who's, in good standing in the community. So again, we can't help everyone, but that's why we've kind of carved out the lower income folks, as our primary targets to provide them help.
And again, you say there is the income threshold that you can't make more than $17,000 a year as roughly as
might be a little bit more
as an individual, more or less. But beyond that, if you meet the qualifications, the representation these individuals get, they do not have to pay, correct?
That is correct.
You work with them.
That's correct. We work with them. We provide legal advice at no charge. The only things that we don't do are pay money out of pocket to cover someone's fees for filing a lawsuit, for example, or things of that nature. And again, that's typically a non-expungement situation, because expungements are generally a low cost, if not no cost issue. But the money and access to legal services is a pervasive problem. We are not the only provider. We have legal services in East Tennessee. We have similar organizations in West Tennessee. And getting this help out for folks who are in a position where they're trying to bootstrap their way back up and who are very serious about a second chance. These are very much services that they should be looking into.
Awesome. We'll take a break. Our final segment when we come back. And again, stick around. We'll make sure to put up the phone numbers so you can reach out if you need it to Legal Aid Society before the program ends. We'll be right back.